The headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador. I'm Carla Gonzalez, and this is From the South. The governments of Ecuador and Colombia have confirmed that the bodies found last week in the border region of Tumaco were those of the team of journalists from El Comercio newspaper who were kidnapped and murdered on the border between the two countries.
The Attorney General of Colombia has confirmed the bodies found in Tumaco, a port city and municipality of Nariño Department, Colombia, are those of journalists Javier Ortega, photographer Paul Rivas, and their driver Efrain Segarra, who were abducted and murdered on the Ecuadorian border with Colombia in March.
We have used dental records provided to us by family members to identify the remains. Also, DNA tests confirmed the information given by Colonel Fausto Olivos. The examinations were done according to international protocols.
According to the Foreign Minister, Ecuador is working with Colombia to deal with this situation and to facilitate for the relatives of the deceased to return to Ecuador with the bodies of their loved ones.
We have one of our planes in Cali, ready to bring the bodies back to Ecuador on Wednesday morning.
Lawmakers involved in this case highlight the fact that the National Assembly has gone to the considerable lengths to answer questions with regards to the abduction, but they are still demanding answers from the government.
What's most important now is finding out the truth about what happened. We have lost 3, yes, but we cannot lose the truth, and this is something that the government has not yet provided.
During the journey of the relatives to Colombia, several Colombian media outlets have published unofficial information relating to the families. Given the circumstances, the relatives have asked the governments of Ecuador and Colombia to better coordinate their efforts. They also announced they will continue with their struggle to reveal the truth about the murders. Denise Herrera, Telesur Quito, Ecuador.
And Colombia's Attorney General Néstor Humberto Martínez said that this crime will not go unpunished. Martínez went to the southwestern city of Cali to follow up on the DNA identification process. The bodies were handed over to Ecuadorian authorities and are scheduled to return to Ecuador early on Wednesday.
This horrendous crime will not go unpunished, and the justice system will act very soon to determine who is responsible.
Meanwhile, the head of Ecuadorian NGO to protect journalists Fundamedios, César Ricaurte, said in an interview to local media that the Inter-American Court of Human Rights has created an independent commission to look into the case and clarify all of the details. Ricaurte said the commission is set to arrive to Ecuador in July. Now to Nicaragua, where the national dialogue is partially paralyzed as the opposition urges Daniel Ortega's government to call early elections as a requirement to officially resume the talks. Meanwhile, violence continues in the streets. A woman police officer was killed on Monday, and at least 8 people, including a baby, were killed over the weekend. 7 people were killed in the capital, Managua, and 1 in the city of Masaya. An emotional funeral was held for the 15-month-old baby who died when his mother was taking him to a babysitter. At least 194 people have been killed since the protests started 2 months ago, according to the Commission for Truth, Peace and Justice. Meanwhile, the United States continues its attempts to interfere. A group of senators called on President Donald Trump to impose sanctions on those who they see as responsible for human rights violations in Nicaragua. Let's go to our correspondent in Managua, María José Díaz, who has more.
The team from the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights is in Nicaragua. They are here to provide technical advice to the verification and security table in charge of guaranteeing a ceasefire, and to give a plan to stop the road blockades in certain areas as proposed by the government. This team will meet with both the government and the opposition. Although there is not a public agenda, I can tell you that sessions were held on Monday at Our Lady of Fatima Church, the headquarters of the National Dialogue, according to the Episcopal Conference. However, a date has yet to be announced for the National Dialogue to be officially restarted. On the other hand, Nicaraguan police reported that an officer was killed on Monday morning by violent opposition groups while she was helping clean debris from the streets along with the local residents of the eastern municipality of Nagarote.
Since the beginning of the electoral process, Andrés Manuel López Obrador in Mexico has been the favorite to win the election on July 1st. Let's know more about the presidential candidate of Juntos Haremos Historia.
Andrés Manuel López Obrador has made 3 attempts at the presidency of Mexico, this time with the coalition Juntos Haremos Historia, which is a coalition, the Morena, Labor, and Social Encounter parties.
This time we're going all the way to the presidential palace. I think so because people want a real change.
In the year 2000, El Peje, as he is also known, was elected to the government of Mexico City. 4 years later, he had to defend himself in a legal process that was opened up over his refusal to expropriate a venue located in the eastern part of the city.
I am certain that I'm not being judged for violating the law, but for my way of thinking and acting, and what that could represent for the future of this country.
With strong popular support, he participated in the presidential elections in 2006, but he didn't make it to Los Pinos. Thousands took the Zócalo and the streets of the capital to demand a recount of the votes. This was one of the most questioned elections in the history of Mexico. He has traveled all over Mexico. One of his key policies has been the defense of the country's natural resources. This is why he led the movement against the privatization of the oil industry.
The plundering of oil will create an environment of discontent.
After losing the 2012 elections, he starts the national regeneration political movement, Morena.
All the people are with him.
Poor people first has been the permanent slogan of the man, born in Tabasco 65 years ago.
We are going to help the poor more than any other. I'm not hiding it. For the common good, but the poor come first, but also the middle class.
In the electoral campaign of 2018, his proposals focusing on social issues have a marked difference compared to his contenders. The conservative Ricardo Anaya and ruling party candidate José Antonio Meade, who want to continue with a neoliberal model.
What we are seeing is a similar proposal, in tune with the privileged class in Mexico.
López Obrador is also proposing a different model to counter the violence that affects the country, and it has led to 250,000 murders according to non-governmental organizations.
We have to restore our society, rebuild families, schools, social organizations, unions, and the government.
López Obrador has promised to fight corruption and revise all the contracts that the current government has signed with the private sector, especially in the areas of energy and the construction of Mexico City's new airport. Since the beginning of the electoral process, the favorite candidate across all polls has faced constant opposition from big businesses, and many here in Mexico see that as a good thing.
Local deputy candidate for the Morena party, Emigdio López Avendaño, was murdered while campaigning less than a week before the general election on Sunday. López Avendaño was killed alongside 3 other people. According to local authorities, the candidate's caravan was shot at in the municipality of San Vicente Coatlan. A 4th campaign member was hurt and transferred to a regional hospital. Presidential candidate for Morena, Andrés Manuel López Obrador, lamented the murder and asked authorities to find those responsible. López Avendaño was campaigning for a seat in Congress in the 21st district. The U.S. border security chief said the detention of parents crossing from Mexico to the United States has been halted for the time being, as they do not have enough space to hold them. The Customs and Border Protection Agency is now trying to keep detained families together while parents await trial. Last week, President Donald Trump signed an executive order to stop the forced separations of migrant parents from their children following widespread national and international outrage. Nonetheless, the Trump administration has vowed to prosecute all adults who cross the border. A group of 32 migrant parents from Central American countries were released from custody on Monday in El Paso, Texas. According to Annunciation House, an organization helping migrants at the border, the 32 parents who were released were traveling with a total of 34 children, averaging 10 years of age. Most of these families come from Honduras, with others having migrated from Guatemala and El Salvador. The parents spoke about the ordeal of having their children taken away from them.
What hurts the most is to be separated when we only came here to give them a better life, a safer life. Even though she's only 5 years old, she understands a lot, and she told me that as long as we were together, she would be happy. She's not angry at me or anything like that.
We're taking a short break now, but join us again after a video from our multimedia team. Welcome back. The United Socialist Party of Venezuela has condemned the new sanctions imposed by the European Union to 11 high-profile government officials on Monday. Vice President Delcy Rodriguez is the most senior member of Nicolás Maduro's government to be targeted by travel bans and asset freezes. The 28 EU states pledged last month to punish Venezuela with sanctions over the May re-election of Maduro, which returned him to office until 2025. The European bloc also called for fresh presidential elections to be held in the country.
We understand that a Bolivarian position and a position of sovereignty bother certain de facto powers, but don't look at us as cowards. What they do with that policy is to blockade the country, to harm the country. They do it because they have no national power, no unity, no coherence, because they don't tell their supporters the truth.
On Monday, the National Workers' Union called a national 24-hour strike in Argentina in rejection of the adjustment measures of President Mauricio Macri's government and the return to the IMF. The Argentinian Workers' Union, social movements, and political forces joined in the demonstrations.
Despite declarations from Labor Minister Jorge Triaca, who stated that this general strike benefits the leaders more than it does the people, the widespread compliance to stopping work across the nation proves the opposite.
The working sector is doing very bad with this government, and we believe that there has to be a change of direction in our politics, especially in economic and social matters, in order to correct the rampant inequality we see every day.
As workers are paying for these brutal adjustments. There are layoffs, there is downswing. How do we face this? We have to face this on the streets.
Protesters say the national strike is in defense of the working class and the most vulnerable sectors. The administration of Mauricio Macri has to listen to the complaints because otherwise social disputes will rise.
The IMF will have a negative impact because our currency will be undervalued. Interest rates will be very high and credit rates will be very low. Price hikes will continue and there will be no subsidies to help us. The government went to the IMF as a result of the collapse of their own politics. I want to highlight this point in particular because we face a government that has completely failed.
Rejection to the adjustment measures as well as the agreement with the International Monetary Fund was shared by left-wing forces and different worker unions that joined the strike by blocking highways, streets, and with activities all over the country.
We have to throw out the IMF and defeat this economic plan, and we have to start discussing what new measures we have to apply for this crisis. so that it's those at the top who pay for it. No more paying for the foreign debt. We have to renationalize companies. We have to nationalize banks and foreign trade so all of our money stays in the country. With these measures, there will be enough money for health, education, public works, and to provide jobs. So we have to keep fighting.
Meanwhile, the government is not listening to the complaints. The workers' movement promises to stay on the streets with further actions in rejection to social exclusion and the broken economic model that is being implemented by Macri.
Thousands of public sector workers protested in Costa Rica against the government's austerity measures. Unions and other social sectors made a call to demonstrate against the tax package that the government of President Carlos Alvarado intends to pass. Protesters blocked the main roads on capital city San Jose, while several bank offices, courts, hospitals and schools remained closed. The government filed a complaint in a labor court to declare this strike illegal, which could result in a salary reduction to the workers who took part in it. Lawyers for the former Brazilian president Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva have filed an official request to the Supreme Court of Justice, asking them to review irregularities in his recent trial. They hope this will lead to Lula's release from prison, where he is serving a 12-year sentence on corruption charges.
Free or not free? That's the question facing former president of Brazil Lula da Silva, currently in jail on corruption charges. Today, the Supreme Federal Court might review a request from Lula's lawyers to release him while he awaits the results of his acquittal appeals. After the request was shelved last week, Lula's legal team made an urgent appeal to get the case reviewed today, before the annual judiciary recess. They say the former president has been in custody for 80 days under a sentencing that disrespected many constitutional guarantees and that his fundamental rights are in danger. Fábio Tofik, a leading Brazilian lawyer, says Lula's case is complex, mostly because it depends on an interpretation of the law on which many ministers of the Supreme Federal Court disagree on.
They are debating if the appeal sent to the Supreme Court can bring forth any constitutional issues that might make the court suspend its decision to arrest Lula in the first place. But even if they might be against jail in the second instance, they could come to the conclusion that there are non-constitutional issues in this specific case.
Regarding the acquittal appeals, Tofik, who analyzed Lula's sentencing back in April, says the document does have some logical flaws that could benefit Lula's case.
There are some logical mistakes. There are arguments that don't lead to the magistrate's conclusions, or shouldn't have. I believe the Supreme Court is going to be dealing with some controversial issues, to say the least.
The former president is currently serving 12 years in Curitiba's federal prison for corruption and money laundering. His opponent says justice has been done. His defense fights for his acquittal, and his supporters still hope he can run for president in this year's elections. Mia Alberti, Telesur in São Paulo.
Still in Brazil, residents from a favela in Rio de Janeiro met with police representatives after a 14-year-old boy was killed this week by a stray bullet. Student Marco Vinicius da Silva was caught in the middle of a police operation hunting down drug traffickers in the Maré favelas as he was heading to school. Relatives and residents are demanding justice and protection for favelas residents. Last February, President Michel Temer militarized the state of Rio de Janeiro, a move that has failed to reduce violence and insecurity.
We expect that there will be a move regarding the deaths from last week, but we wait mainly for them to come up with a proposal of police engagement that respects the lives of favela residents. He told me, "Mom, I know who shot me. I saw who shot me." I said, "My son, who shot you?" "It was armored policemen, Mom. He didn't see that I was wearing a school uniform."
Paraguayan authorities seized a shipment of cannabis weighing nearly 15,000 kilos. The drugs were seized at the Central Department of San Pedro as they were heading to Argentina. According to Paraguayan authorities, the shipment is worth over $7 million. They believe the drug was meant to pass into Argentina through a riverbank area in the department of Itapúa. Authorities also believe that most of the drugs would have eventually ended up in Chile, where the price per kilo is over $1,500 US. So let's take a look at today's games at the Russia World Cup. Australia will face Peru, and Denmark will meet France for the first matches in Group C. Later on, Nigeria will play against Argentina, and Iceland will go against Croatia in Group D. Football may not seem like the sport of choice in a floating fishing village in Thailand, but a lack of grass and solid ground couldn't keep a group of kids from playing their favorite sport. 30 years ago, in a floating fishing village next to the island of Koh Phangan in southern Thailand, a group of determined children decided to create a floating pitch. One of those kids, Prasit Heming, is now all grown up, but one thing has remained the same. He is still a football fan, and now his club has won the Youth Football Championship in southern Thailand for 7 consecutive years from 2004 to 2010. We'll take one last short break, but be sure to join us after this video from our multimedia team. Thanks for joining us again. In Spain, a historic trial is about to take place to investigate thousands of cases of babies stolen from their mothers during the Francisco Franco dictatorship from 1939 to 1975. An 85-year-old doctor will be the first person to go on trial. Newborns of left-wing opponents of the regime, also from unmarried and poor couples, were removed from their mothers and adopted by rich families during Franco's regime, a practice that allegedly continued at least until the 80s. Communal clashes in central Nigeria have left 86 people dead. Here's more on that and other stories making headlines around the world.
At least 86 people have died in Nigeria's Central Plateau after clashes broke out between Christian farmers and Muslim herders on Sunday. Fights between different communities over resources and dwindling fertile land have increased in recent years. By some accounts, the violence in the region has now killed more people than the Islamist insurgency in Nigeria's northeast. Far-right Italian Interior Minister Matteo Salvini has said his government is firm on the issue of stopping migrants from reaching Europe. He proposed to set up detention centers on the southern border of Libya. Salvini visited Libya to meet the government and discuss the migrant situation. Italy has agreed to give 20 boats to the Libyan Coast Guard to patrol the marine border.
Blocking the business of illegal immigration means blocking the harmful and dangerous intervention of these foreign ships that, besides ignoring the safety of both the Libyan sailors and the immigrants themselves, proceed with absolute disrespect to any international rule.
The desperate search for a 12-member teenage soccer team and their coach continues in Thailand's Chiang Rai province 3 days after they went missing. They are believed to have been trapped inside a cave network after heavy rain led to rising waters. The team is believed to be alive as authorities say there are some air pockets inside the caves.
In Morocco, refugees get a chance to prove their talent in a competition organized by the country's High Commission of Refugees in capital city Rabat. Refugees coming from Cameroon, Ivory Coast, Syria, Palestine and Libya became poets, rappers, dancers and actors during the competition Refugees Got Talent, to fight prejudices against refugees using the universal language of art. Morocco is currently home to more than 5,000 refugees from 38 countries. And before we end our show, remember you can watch our special World Cup program with Argentina football star Diego Maradona. De la mano del 10, the World Cup according to Maradona. It will air only on Telesur every night during the tournament in Russia. And these are the times to watch it, so don't miss out. And with that, we come to the end of this news brief. But this and other stories, as you know, you can find on our website at telesurtv.net/English. And be sure to also follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Carla Gonzalez. Thank you for watching.
The ruling world order has always subjugated the masses.